Hey friends, it's
Hi.
a great Tuesday to be listening to Author's Best Friend podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and I'm here today with my bestie, Tracy Baack. Tracy, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Spindrift because Spindrift unofficially sponsors my writing, so it seemed only appropriate to make one while we recorded.
That's awesome. Do you find that drinking when you're writing is a little bit easier in general, or is it like a writing block thing? Or
I always have water, like regular water, but if it's cold, I like to have a cup of coffee while I'm writing. But when it's warm, Spindrift is like my go-to because the sparkling water flavor, it just gives me something to keep going. So I can't tell you how many hundreds of cans I probably drank throughout the process of writing.
Just need a little bit of suds to get
yes, a little
to
sparkle.
Get the words flowing. I am drinking a mango wheat ale.
Ooh.
And I think at this point, I think our 12th episode, maybe we have fans. Fans out there will probably be raising an eyebrow because I don't drink ales really of any kind. But it was left over in my fridge from people visiting, and I like mango, and I'm trying it, and it's really good.
So you like it?
Yeah. But I don't know if I would go out and buy an ale. But if there's a mango ale around, I'll drink it. But thank you so much for joining me today on the eve of your book release.
I know. Tomorrow.
Which is so exciting. Tracy wrote a lovely story called Love and Other Goals that follows two characters, Mateo and Lana. And do you want to give us just a little bit of breakdown about your book and about the characters?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for saying Lana's name correctly. I'm very touchy about that.
Well, what have people said?
People sometimes say Lana, and it just
Lana,
just can't handle it. So, so Lana and Mateo are both college seniors at a fictional but inspired by my alma mater, College University in Kansas. So they are both college seniors. Lana is very goal-driven, has a very specific plan mapped out for her life, and is kind of checking the boxes towards that. She has great best friends for her sorority. She's involved with a campus ministry that's helping her grow in her faith. So she kind of has everything in line, but she has had a crush on this guy for a couple of years, and he keeps showing interest, but not really making a move. And so she's trying to figure things out. And then one day he kind of not rejects her, but just doesn't take the opportunity to pursue her that was kind of right there for him. And so she's feeling sad. And then Mateo swoops in and asks her to coffee and confesses that he has actually had a crush on her for the last couple of years, but has kept his distance because he kind of caught the vibes between her and the other guy. So he starts pursuing her, and they just have this sweet relationship throughout their final year of college. And so it's very nostalgic to me, just of thinking back to college and just that season of life and the different activities that you're involved with, especially senior year, preparing for graduation. So there's a lot of bittersweetness to it, I think, but it just kind of follows their story through their relationship and figuring out future plans. And that's kind of the nutshell.
Do you resonate with Lana's personality type? Like, are you sort of very organized, maybe more type A, like eye on the prize type of gal?
Yeah. So yes and no. Mostly yes. Lana is totally just took the low-hanging fruit and wrote her as myself, basically. So her character is very similar to me, which made it easy to write, like, oh, well, how would I react in this situation? This is what I would do. I like to think, as I'm writing characters, I like to think about the Enneagram, which is not exactly a personality profile. It's more like kind of your inner motivations. But to me, that helps me to like kind of round out the character of like, how would they respond? What would be important to them? What would be driving them? So I am an Enneagram 8, and I wrote Lana as an Enneagram 8. So our motivations and reactions are very similar. My husband laughed when he read it because he was like, where'd that come from? So I have always been very goal-driven. I'm not quite as type A maybe as she. Like, I don't necessarily have like quite those like check boxes of everything. Like I'm very intense about my goals, but I'm not necessarily as like maybe organized. I'm not so organized as maybe Lana is. So so we have a lot of similarities, but a little different too.
I think those Post-it notes behind you might beg to differ. You look pretty organized to me.
Ironically, this completely did not work. I tried it because I'd seen other authors using Post-it notes. This is like for my second book. And I made them and I've looked at them like one time. So the system did not work for me.
That's funny. You tried to be a Lana type and it just didn't work out.
I tried.
So you said that your husband, so he's read your book. Did he recognize himself in Mateo at all?
It's not like people have asked me like, oh, did you just rise with your and Kyle's love story? And I'm like, no, it's not at all. Like, it's not our story. So people expecting that I'm like, no, that's not it. But I definitely incorporated glimmers of Kyle into Mateo. So my husband is an Enneagram 3 with a 2 wing, and I wrote Mateo as an Enneagram 2 with a 3 wing. So they have a lot of similarities. And like some of the sweet things that Mateo does for Lana are actually things that like my husband did for me. So he had fun with that, like seeing like, oh, that was, from us when we were in college dating. And so he definitely, Mateo's a soccer player. My husband played soccer, but not in college. He played up like through high school and then stopped. So he had fun catching some of those little references.
Oh, gotcha. That's so cute.
Yeah.
So before we jump in even further about the characters, how are you feeling about tomorrow? You have a very cool book launch event tomorrow evening, right?
Yeah, Friday evening. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Friday evening.
The day after. Yeah.
Yeah, which is very exciting.
I know. I'm excited. It's so surreal. Like I remember talking with you and Sierra back in January, I think, as we were processing through, the timeline and the process. And at the time, it felt so far away. So I was like, can't we speed this up? But I'm glad we didn't speed it up because I needed the time. But it's very surreal to think that, like, it's actually tomorrow happening and going to be out there in the world finally. And I'm so ready, though. I'm sure Sierra felt the same way. And most authors probably do. That there's so much buildup and you're like, teasing it and trying to tell people a little bit so they get interested, but not give away everything. And now I'm just like, okay, let's just read it and people can talk about it. And I don't have to like be cryptic about it anymore. Just get it out there.
Yeah. What was that like getting like ARC readers, like getting their responses back?
That's been really fun. Honestly, I don't even know exactly who all my ARC readers are because you all handled that for me, which was amazing. So I have a group chat with some of them who wanted to opt into the group chat. So I kind of know some of them, but not all of them. But it's definitely been fun starting to see their reviews roll in and just their comments, those things that they like or ways that it made them feel or ways that they identified with characters or other people feeling the same nostalgia about college or, different things like that. So it's been really fun to like get that real time feedback and hear what people think and their impressions. And yeah, it's makes it really fun to share it with other people now. So
you've gone through several rounds of like editing and like copy editing and even like people from like our like marketing and stuff have read it. Like, is this the first time that a larger community, like from the people from the book community, have read this book and they're people that you don't really know, like aside from like friends and family and stuff?
Yes. So I had a very small pool of people read it ahead of time. Like I think I had 4 kind of early beta readers, and then obviously I had a couple of editors and another person read it kind of in the process there. And my husband. But I didn't let my husband read it until I had like polished it quite a bit. I felt really weird about him reading it. But yeah, it was not until really this month that a broader pool of people have started reading it because I just didn't send it to a lot of people beforehand. So
did you set like a rule for yourself? Like, I think some people get nervous about, like, I'm not going to sit here and read all of these reviews. Maybe I'll read a couple or I'll see a few and then I won't go look back. Like, did you set like a rule for yourself about checking in with people's reviews or are you just reading all of them?
So I think that I'll probably have to be more careful about that once it's out and people, like random people are reading it. Right now, if an ARC reader tags me in their review post, then I read it. And for the most part, I've only had one person tag me in like a review that they like didn't love it because they didn't love the like Christian faith elements. But other than that, if an ARC reader had tagged me, then I've gone ahead and read it. But I haven't necessarily gone to like Goodreads or Amazon yet to like read reviews there. But I probably should come up with some guidelines of what I'm going to do on that front once it's more broadly out there. I'll make my husband go read them and tell me which ones I should read.
He can screen them for safety.
That's right.
Yeah. I think like comments like that, like the one you just mentioned about not really liking the Christian faith aspect of it, I think is sort of maybe the best negative feedback you could hope for reviewers, because it really just chalks up to like this particular trope or this particular aspect of life I chose to focus on for these characters just isn't for you.
Yeah.
But it isn't necessarily anything about like, you know, oh my gosh, this book was riddled with typos or the plot line didn't really make any sense. Like, as long as it comes down to preferences, those are the kinds of reviews I think you can handle. Like, oh yeah, just like wasn't for you, you know? I think that's always positive. But yeah, I've talked with a couple people who, you know, this wasn't their first rodeo, and I think as the books go down, as they have published more and more books, they're kind of just like, I sparingly look at my reviews. Like, it's just they could really just, you'll have 1,000 good ones, and then there's just one that will just knock you down. And so it's like, you know, I'll read them sparingly.
Yeah. I can totally see how that would be a positive thing to do.
Yeah. So I'm curious about, okay, so you wrote what we would call like a sweet romance or like a closed door romance. And I'm curious about a couple of things related to that, which is one, like, how did you know that this was the story that you wanted to write for your first book? And follow up, which maybe is like interweaved, is that this seems like a thing that's maybe picking up a little bit of speed. And I say that, no, like acknowledging that I'm 100 years old when it comes to social media. Like, I'm not on TikTok, I'm barely on Instagram. Like, I just don't have that thing in my brain that gets reward from that. Like, I just got lucky, I guess. I can easily see myself
probably not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think my screen time on my phone is like at 3 hours a day, maybe. Like, I don't know. I was just born with a 100-year-old person's approach to technology, but not technology. I'm actually pretty tech savvy. It's just the social media. But all that to say, it seems like, you know, when I first got into reading as an adult, like a spice rating was like a big thing, and people would be like, oh, it's 2 chili peppers, I'm not going to read that. Like, that's too mild, or like that's kind of where like the buildup leads to, which is like, you know, okay, when are we going to get to the open door piece? Like, when are we going to reach this? And I feel like there's like a maybe what started as like a smaller community of people that were writing books that are for adults, but the buildup is more emotional, and you don't really need to lay all that out on the pages. And I'm wondering if you found that was like an easy process to like market for, or if I mean, obviously you haven't gotten all the reviews for that, but I have heard of like people who are writing in like a young adult space, because it's such, like I just was talking with SK Horton about this, because it's such a spectrum from 12 to 18 years old. Yeah. Like trying to figure out who your audience, or for the audience to figure out who the book is for. Like, you know, a 13-year-old picks it up and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so sweet. Maybe a 18-year-old picks it up and it's like, oh my gosh, this is like the slowest book. This is for kids, you know? So I'm just wondering about how you thought about the book that you wanted to write, and knowing that you wanted to keep it a sweet romance, and if you've had any interesting insights or experiences with trying to market that in this like young adult space. Because I mean, your characters are college students too, so
yeah, it's a kind of new adult. Yeah, I guess there's so many different terms and categories, and Amazon has so many options. And like, what is this? So I went with new adult because they're, college seniors. Yeah, heading into adulthood. So yeah, I definitely think there is becoming a broader audience for closed door sweet romance. To be completely honest with you, when I wrote this, like, I just knew that this was what I'm going to write. Like, I just will not ever write an open door book. That's just not, I just won't. So, but I wrote it, and then I had not really been a part of Bookstagram, or I'm also not on TikTok. I just Nope. Can't deal with TikToks. But like on my personal, just, private family account on Instagram, like I followed a few bookish people, but not, enough to where it was like my entire feed. So when I first created my author profile and started trying to kind of dip my toes into Bookstagram world, I was kind of worried about that. I was like, I don't know if there's an audience for this. Most of the Bookstagram people I had seen were definitely more on like the open door spicy, romance side, which is great and fine. So I was honestly like a little bit like, oh, like, are there going to be readers for my book? Like, how do I find them? I don't know. But, Instagram algorithms do their thing. And like you start following one person and it leads you down the rabbit hole of all of the similar people. So I have been pleasantly surprised that there's actually a huge audience of closed door romance readers on Bookstagram. There's all sorts of Bookstagram accounts that recommend books or, give spice ratings or like tell you which chapters to skip if you want to read a book that you don't want to read open door scenes. So yeah, I've been very encouraged that like I feel like I have found, the audience and starting to get my foot in the door, at least hopefully. So I hope they buy it and read it and like it. But it was going into it. I didn't know. I was like, this might completely flop and there might be no one to read this, but I still did it. So, I've been very happy to find that there is a growing audience for that, I think. And people come at it from different reasons. Like for, some people it's faith related that, like their like faith convictions are such that they don't want to read open door content. Some people just feel like it's too, makes, things difficult for them personally or in marriage. I mean, there's just so many different reasons that people come at it, but there's definitely the pool of people there, I guess, that are interested in those kinds of books. So, so I've been encouraged by that, I guess.
Did you feel maybe pressure is not the right word, but did you feel sort of like you needed to really heighten like the emotional pieces of the book to make sure that like that same sort of like, I don't know, giddiness, feet kicking, excitement things that people might get from those types of books, they can still get from your book, but just through like a different avenue?
Yeah, I do think that, and I've seen, other authors or other, Bookstagrammers in the closed door community kind of talk about this, of just the emphasis on the emotional connection or, just those sweet romantic swoony moments that maybe aren't even necessarily physical touch related. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's a romance, so you have to have elements of romance and like, some tension and whatnot. So you still have to write that in, but you do have to be more creative. And how do you focus on, yes, the physical attraction, but the emotional connection that they're building and like what they're feeling. You do have to be a little bit more creative on that front, I guess. I guess pressure in a good way. You still want it to be a swoony romance, even if it's closed doors. So I think that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Your characters, they hold hands a lot. And maybe this is intentional, but there was something that made me think about like, for your characters, holding hands is so intimate and like it was so sweet that it became such a theme for me of like hand holding. And after I had finished the book, Parker was going to be meeting with you and talking about your cover.
Yeah.
And he calls me and was like, do you have any thoughts about like any scenes that are standing out before we go into this? And we had talked about the soccer themes. And I was like, whatever it is, there's got to be like hand holding. And all I could see were hands. One of them I actually pitched to him. I was like, what you could do, maybe he told you about this one. I was like, there's this scene where Lana's in the library and she's working on an assignment or maybe an application for something. Mateo comes in behind her and like puts his hands like over her eyes and says something. And I was like, it's just the hands. Like the hands have such a meaning in this book now. Like there's just like the highlight of like, I don't know, like the tanness of their hands or the softness of their hands or whatever. And so I was like, or you could do that with like the cover of him like covering her eyes. And I was like, I'm sorry. All I could think about are the hands in this book. Like hand holding is such a theme. And I'm so glad that they're holding hands on the cover. That's perfect.
Yes, it worked out perfectly. Yes, Parker nailed it with the cover. It's perfect.
Yeah. So I think you did a really good job with like creating those levels of intimacy, but even from like the basics that you wouldn't even think about, like a good comforting hug where you can, smell their perfume or their cologne, and you can, or maybe smell the sunscreen or the gum that they're chewing, or just like those things that are very nostalgic from like the sweet, like early courtship type things.
Yes,
I think you highlighted
definitely.
those really nicely. And is that something that just like came really naturally? Like, are you a very sensory person? And so writing about those things, it was like, of course, this is what this smells like or what this feels like. Or was this like a process of like a lot of editing and drafting and that sort of thing?
I am definitely a physical touch person. So that was easy to want to incorporate. I'm trying to think like other sensory. I have to slow myself down to write more description about settings and scenes or things. Like I tend to focus on like action and dialogue and what they're doing. And so I kind of have to like slow myself down and be like, no, wait, what were they? Where were they? What did it look like? What did it feel like? What did it smell like? So that's not my natural writing style, but I know that it's really important to feel like you're there and feel, a part of the story, to like imagine like, what is Lana smelling right now? Or she just walked into this place. What did she see? So that required some self-editing to go back and incorporate more of those things. So, but the physical touch stuff, like that's my jam. I am totally a physical touch love language person. So I love that.
I'm making a public note to myself, and everyone should hold me accountable, that you don't drink beer during podcasts. And I know this, but I have burps so bad. I keep turning away. I'm so sorry.
Well, I'm drinking sparkling water, so I don't know if that's better or not.
My brain just went on a tangent. But by the time that I got the book, I felt like, so you start out with this really cool scene with Lana being, it's like a sorority recruitment event. Yeah. And I was also in a sorority, and the way that you describe like the heat and like what she's wearing and how that's like related to the heat and her hair sticking to her and all these kinds of things, it's so vivid. And so it's like, I could tell that you were very thorough and intentional about including all of those things. So what did the process look like from the time that you started drafting the book to the time when you started getting serious about like creating a team to help you get it ready for release?
Yeah, I first started writing the book in July of 2023. So I was sitting in a coffee shop. My kids were with my parents for a few days. So I had more free time than normal over the summer without all the crazy taxiing kids around places. So I was sitting in a coffee shop, and I had thought that I was going to go and just read. But I took a journal with me because I had this idea like just milling around in my head. And I was like, I'm just going to take this journal with me, and I'm just going to write down what I can't stop thinking about. And then it'll be, written down and out of just my head. And so I spent hours just scribbling notes about the basics of the characters, about Lana's character, and about kind of the storyline, like some major scenes that I had pictured in my mind. I scribbled all this out, and then I kind of didn't touch it for a little bit. And then a couple of weeks later, I was on a date with my husband, and I like very sheepishly, like embarrassed, was like, so what if I told you I was thinking about writing a rom-com or like a contemporary romance book? And he was like, well, first of all, he's like, what do you mean? Kyle is a huge reader. He reads lots of nonfiction and like leadership and business books. So, he had seen me read contemporary romance, but, he's a little clueless. And so I kind of
Had he ever tried any of those?
No, but I made him read one before he could read mine. I was like, you have to read a different book before you're allowed to read my book. So he did eventually read one. But yeah, so I threw it out to him, and he took me totally seriously and was like, I think you should write like you're going to publish it. And so I started actually transferring things to my computer. And then once the kids started school, while they were at school, I would, kind of plunk away at it. I kept it a total secret though. So Kyle knew that I was doing it, but even from him, I was like a little secretive about how much time I was spending on it, because I still was like, I don't know, embarrassed to be doing it in a sense. And so I started in July. I finished my first draft on December 29th, 2023. That's our anniversary. So I finished the first draft and then let it sit for a little bit and then went back and started editing and started talking with Kyle, like, am I really going to do this? Like, what do I think? And started, kind of looking into different publishing options. And that's when I came across you guys on Instagram. Someone I followed had shared one of your posts, and I was like, oh, look at that. People who help authors figure out what they're doing. So I spent the time with you and Sierra, and that was kind of the beginning of figuring out, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and we're going to go this route, and getting organized and figuring out what the process is from, like, having a draft to actually publishing. So that journey, I guess, started in January of this year. So, and now here we are in June, and it's coming out.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation about like when people use pen names, and like the pros and cons of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you had said, like, oh, I haven't really told very many people about this, so I could see like the benefit of doing that. And then some later conversation, you were like, no, I just gotta keep it. And then you had said that you told your friends and stuff. What was that experience like telling people close to you, like, hey, I did this thing. Do you want to read it?
Oh, Lauren, okay. My closest group of friends, we've been in a Bible study together for a couple of years. We all go to the same church and we're in Bible study together. And they're my people. Like, we talk about everything, all of the hard things in life, all the fun things. And we meet every Tuesday. Every Tuesday morning we have Bible study together. But I could not bring myself to confess that I had written a book. So, Lauren, I sent them all a text message instead.
No.
Yes, I did. I was like, I can't bring myself to say these words out loud, but I wrote this book. Ta-da. So that's how they found out, via text message. And they were all amazing and like, wanted to hear all about it and sent me all these audio voice recordings. And then the next week at Bible study, we actually talked about it in person. But yeah, literally, I mean, my mom, my sister, like everybody I told via text message. I just totally took the coward's way out. It's like,
do they live where you live? Like, are they close by in Kansas?
My sister is here in the Kansas City area. My parents are like 3 hours away, but we see them, a reasonable amount. So, but yes, I definitely just like texted or Instagram messaged all of my friends to let them know, and then went from there.
Was anyone like totally shocked?
Oh, I think everyone was shocked. Because I hadn't ever given any sort of indication that I was interested in doing something like this. So everyone was totally surprised, totally shocked. But also, everyone that knows me knows that I love reading and I love writing. That was like my major in college. So I think it was shocking, but then it made sense. Like once, they do. So yeah.
You were an English major in college?
I was an English education major. But I never really liked the education piece. I really would have loved to have just taken all literature classes and writing. But
so did you do anything, do you do any writing, aside from this?
Not right after college. Let's see. When we moved to Kansas City in 2018, I started doing some copywriting jobs that was not it wasn't like fiction, but it was more like writing like newsletter articles and things like that for mailers and stuff like that. So I started doing some copy editing and copywriting, and then some part-time, sometimes just freelance. So I was kind of getting back into the writing world. But in college, I wrote, all the time for all of my literature classes and writing papers and analyzing books, constantly. But then immediately after college, I didn't really write, but then got my feet wet again a few years ago, and it just made me want to write more. So now here we are.
So this is your first time with creative writing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is it the same sort of muscle? Did it feel just as easy for that to flow as things you had done before?
Yeah. Even way back in high school, I wrote for our school newspaper. I always did features. I never did news article. I was never the nonfiction-y, newsy type of person. I always geared more towards kind of more creative. So I think, writing to some extent is similar even across, whether I was writing about staging a home to sell, you're still using some of the same patterns of, drawing interest and whatnot. So So it was really different because you're like creating a whole new world out of nothing and these people that don't really exist and, you know, figuring out their backstories and why they do certain things or how they would act. So it's really different, but I've read so much that it felt really natural. Like I never, as I was writing Love and Other Goals, my struggle was never writing. It was always having the time to write. Like I would have so much going in my mind of what I wanted to get down and just didn't have the time to actually sit and do it. So that might change with future books, but at least for this one, it was just like, it was just there waiting for me to have time to sit down and type it out.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like that's pretty speedy. Like if you started writing, I think you said July of 2023, like to have an idea for a book for your first one and to finish it and have it out like in the year, that's I would say that that's actually pretty quick. Like when you were like, yeah, I turned away from a little bit, like sometimes you'll hear like, yeah, I turned away. And then like a year later, I was like, okay, like I should pick this. You're like, oh, it's just a couple weeks. And I was like, no, we're doing this.
2 days. I don't have to wait for us.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's very impressive. So you said the writing wasn't the hard part. What was it like writing a boy? Like, was that easy? I don't think I've ever asked anyone this, and I'm so curious about it.
That is an interesting question. I will say this book is single point of view. It's not dual point of view. I do have future plans for dual point of view, but for this one specifically, I knew it was just going to be Lana. Was it hard to write in the end? No and yes. Sorry, this is terrible podcast recording. I gotta think about this.
No, this is real.
Parker, edit this out. I don't think it was hard. My husband and I just talk so much. I mean, it's like so cliche, but he's my best friend. We process everything. Like we talk about everything together. And we talk a lot about, especially in the last handful of years, as we've like learned more about the Enneagram. I feel like I keep bringing that up, but it's been really interesting. But just even talking like, how does his brain work differently than mine? Like, how is he motivated differently than me? And how do we need to like speak each other's language? So I feel like it's something that we talk about a lot. So probably me writing someone similar to Kyle was easier because even though they're not exact, like Kyle and Mateo are not exactly the same, but they have enough similarities that it was like, oh, this is kind of what I think Kyle would be like. So, you know, maybe in the future, if I'm writing a really different male character, that might be harder. But I don't feel like it was terrible to get. And also, just having read so many books, I feel like you pick up on like common things that authors write that men say or do or think, and who knows if it's actually accurate or if it's just a bunch of men written by women that are not real. You know, that's okay.
Yeah.
So
I think a good amount of it is probably that, which is like, especially when it comes to like the sweet gestures type things, is probably a lot of just like, I would love if somebody did this for me or somebody said this to me. And so it might not really reflect reality too much in that respect, but there are definitely books that you read and there are small little mannerisms that their male characters do and you're like, yes, that's a manly thing to do. And like it's so interesting to me that I'm like, oh, you live with someone or you've been around someone and you picked up on that and you put it in a book, and it's very subtle, but it's like it's exactly the thing, you know. Something as simple as just like taking their jacket off and draping it around you, or opening the car door. Like those just like little things you're like, oh, that, you know, my husband does that or my boyfriend does that or whatever. But yeah, I think that it's so, I mean, you have a couple like male characters that you write that are interacting in scenes. And I always think about like how is it that people plan out who these characters are going to be? I think probably the most common answer that I get, which is sort of like kind of what you gave when you were talking about Lana and Mateo, like being similar and dissimilar to you and Kyle, which is that like you kind of root them a little bit in people like yourself, you know, like there's some of these qualities, but then you sort of like stray and maybe some of the larger ways.
Yeah.
And I wonder if like as you continue to write books, that gets easier to not ground. I talked to Sierra about this, like her Model Behavior, a book that just came out, like I don't really, I mean, aside from like the sensory stuff, the personalities of either of her characters, like don't, like I read stuff and I'm like, oh, that's so Sierra, or like, oh, that's kind of like Parker, or like, oh, maybe that character like kind of does stuff like I do. But these characters, I'm like, where did you get these people from? They're not anything like you. And I feel like maybe that gets a little bit easier as you go along to like truly create a person out of thin air. Like I don't maybe my friend did this one thing and I'm going to have them do this thing, but in terms of like their characteristics, it's like what I like to call the anthropomorphic hands. Your hands just kind of write the character and you're like, I don't know what they're going to do in this scene, but my hands will figure it out.
They're coming.
Yeah. So you said, and I can see the Post-its there, that you're working on another book. How's that been going?
It's really good. I have not said anything publicly about what the book is yet, but my first draft is done.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I had my first beta.
You don't have time to do
I don't know. Oh, don't check how clean my house is, and then that will just let you know. Yeah, so my first draft is done. I sent it to a beta reader, and she had read Love and Other Goals also. And so I sent it to her, and I was like, I know that it is not as fully developed as my first draft of Love and Other Goals was. Because with Love and Other Goals, it was like all I could think about. And, like I said, time was always the issue, not ideas. And I just felt so submerged in Lana and Mateo's world and in their characters, and just lying awake in bed and working myself up over their emotions that they would experience and get in the scene. But with the second book, it's been harder because I'm marketing Love and Other Goals, and I was in the editing process with that. So I would start writing the second book, and then I'd have to stop to come back to do another round of edits on Love and Other Goals. And my attention's just been divided, which I mean, welcome to authorhood. You probably always have that. So, but anyway, so I sent the first draft to a beta reader and kind of told her, hey, I know that this needs a little bit more development. So give me your perspective on what you want to see more of. And she gave me some amazing feedback. So now I'm working on incorporating in the things that she kind of told me about. But I'm feeling good. And I feel like now I'm hitting that groove with this book of the new scenes that I am picturing based on her feedback, that I lie awake in bed and I'm like, oh, I should add that, or oh, I need to go back and do this or change this or whatnot. So I'm excited to get back to diving into that and getting it more complete and more developed, and then do 5 rounds of self edits and then start sending it to editors. So it's such a process, but yeah, so that's kind of where it's at the moment.
So when you're at dinner and your husband says, write it like you're going to publish it, is that when you were kind of like, okay, so I'm going to write this and then there probably will be more? Or at what point did that, in that process where you're like, this won't be my last?
I probably, after I finished the first draft and started really figuring out how I was going to publish it. At that point, I think I probably was it had just brought me so much joy to write it. And I just loved it so much. And it made me so happy. I enjoyed it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. And so I had finished the first draft. I was trying to figure out, what I'm going to do publishing wise. And am I really going to pursue this? Or is this just going to be oh, this was something fun that, made me happy. And then my 12-year-old daughter, I guess she was 11 at the time, she turned 12 afterwards, but she also really likes writing. And she had been writing these little stories on her school laptop and would show them to us. And I know I'm biased, but they're actually very good and intriguing. She's a huge reader. My 2 oldest kids are avid readers. So, so much of good writing is just being a good reader. But so she would show us these stories, and she said I think I want to be an author someday. She always used to say, she does ballet, so she's always said I want to be a ballet teacher or something, or a ballerina. But it's the first time she was I think I want to be a writer someday. And it was just this okay, you need to do this so your daughter knows that she could do this someday. So I think that was kind of when the switch flipped, that it was okay, I'm going to publish this and I'm going to keep doing this because I enjoy it and I like it. I mean, if I had gotten into the publishing process and had people read it and they were this is garbage, then I maybe would have jumped ship and abandoned future books. But enough people have told me that they like it, but I'm okay, I'll continue doing this. So
yeah, I mean, that's got to be a great model for your daughter. What did she say when you told her that you had also written a book?
Oh man, so what did she say? I don't know. She was excited. I mean, the concept of publishing a book is very foreign to a middle schooler. So I told, I eventually told her and told my other kids that, I was writing this book and I was looking into publishing it. And so again, like my entire first draft was done before I had like mentioned this to them. So it wasn't until I was in the editing process that then they're like aware that like, oh, mom's like, sitting at the laptop writing or, whatnot. So she was excited. And it's really fun now because even my other kids, so I have a 13-year-old son, and he started writing a little something, and he's like, I don't know if I'll publish it someday, but maybe. And then I have a 9-year-old son that like started writing a little story in his journal, and he's like, I mean, it might not get published, but pretty cool if it did. So it's just fun to see like that they are all picking up on this, like, oh, we could be creative and do something with this. So yeah, so they have thought it's fun.
That's awesome. It's the writer's bug is spreading. Maybe your husband will write his own like leadership and business book.
He totally could. He absolutely could.
I feel like it's one thing to be like, oh, like you wrote a book, like that's crazy, that's really cool. And then when you get the proofs, it's like, I have so many books on my shelf of people that are just like you, like somebody who just woke up one day and was like, I have this story I can't stop thinking about. I'm going to write it. And now it's on people's bookshelves, like all over the US. And it's fame in some ways. Like, I don't know, like it could be somebody's favorite book and you could be talking about it. And there are people in a room that are like, oh, I've never heard of that. Or it's like you have this small community and it somehow spreads between all of the readers in that area. And they're like, oh my gosh, I love that book. And so I feel like when Sierra wrote her first book, like when you're holding it, I was like, wow, we have text messages about these characters and these things. And now there's like a physical book that has your name on it. Like, this is wild. And then I have in my neighborhood, there's like a bunch of like little libraries where you can go and you leave a book, take a book sort of thing. And so I would put some of hers in there. And then when I'm walking my dog, I would check in. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gone. Like somebody else has it. And so it's something so surreal about a physical book with your name on it, which is just like, whoa, I wrote this. Look at all these pages.
Yes, it's so true. Yes. When I first got my proof copy, that was the most, I mean, my husband took a video of it and I did not even know how to act. I was like, this is so creepy. Like it's in my hands and it's a real book. And Parker had designed the cover and I'd seen all the images, and approved them obviously, but like seeing it as a physical thing was just wild. Like I don't even know how to describe it. It was crazy, but crazy good and crazy exciting. Kyle videoed my reaction to me opening a proof for the first time. And I'm kicking myself that I did not video his reaction to seeing my dedication, that I had dedicated it to him, because he teared up and I was like, shoot, I should have videoed that. But
that's sweet.
I missed it.
That's so sweet. So can we expect more purple in your next release? Is purple your favorite color? Like, is this your author color? Or is this just like a Mateo and Lana color?
Okay, so the purple is completely because of my university that I graduated from that inspired the fake setting. So the school colors are purple. Kansas State University, go Wildcats. Anybody that attended K-State will completely pick up on all the little Easter eggs of K-State Manhattan. Like other people, you just read it and it's like, oh, fun. But anybody who's been there will be like, oh, that's this. So, that's what the purple was. As I knew, because K-State had inspired the setting, I was like, I want it to be purple. So it's not necessarily going to be my running theme, but I was like, for this first book, when the setting is so, K-State-ish, like I gotta have the purple. So, and it turned out perfect.
Yeah, you have a very good social media aesthetic. Like I feel like you have really good engagement. Like you have a lot of comments on your posts, which is I think hard to get. And like, I think even just figuring out what I talk about this all the time on the podcast, but what people want across platforms within a platform, like it's just really hard to tell. So is that something that like you do a lot of research and figure out what works and what doesn't? Is it just like some of your stuff is very like culturally relevant, like you have good like sound bites, or like you did the Midnight Mayhem thing that Taylor was doing, which was very clever and very cute. But then you also have like sweet stuff, that incorporates your family or like missed opportunity with your husband, but like little things like that. This is like very sweet that reaches the audience. So does that come naturally, or like how have you been able to kind of like make your way in this, having not even really maybe been having much of a presence, this time last year?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely all new for me. So I am not a researcher whatsoever. Like, never. I mean, this is just classic Enneagram 8. Like, I'm just like, action, let's just go.
Mm-hmm.
And then I probably should have researched more about it. So no, it would probably benefit me if I researched more about algorithms and trends and whatnot, but I don't. I just mostly wing it. I lay in bed and random ideas like the trope teasers with Tracy, where I did the play on the Midnight Mayhem with me, like that just like came to me while I was not sleeping in bed one night. So sometimes it will be, I'll see other authors or other, people use a particular soundbite or do a particular idea, and I'm like, oh, that's like interesting, that's creative, or like, oh, that would be applicable, to my book. And so I'll, do something similar or use, a template from Instagram. But when I first started posting on my author account, oh man, I had no idea what I was doing. Just posted whatever came to mind. And I knew that I learned that reels get more engagement than posts typically, or they reach a wider audience. Like Instagram tends to like push reels more than just posts. So my first reel that I made was terrible, and it took me like 2 hours to put together because I had no idea what I was doing, because I'd never made a reel before. I never had a reason to make a reel on my private Instagram sharing pictures with my kids. So I'm like slowly just figuring out, like Googling things, like how to do different, effects and whatnot. And I mean, I've slowly gotten better. Reels take me less time now. Sometimes they still take me longer than I really should probably spend with them. But yeah, I am probably just throwing spaghetti at the wall and finding out what sticks. And some things stick well and some things don't. And this is probably not a course on how to be successful at social media, because I'm just out here taking it day by day. So
yeah, if it makes you feel any better, Sierra is a researcher, and so am I, like for a living. And her in particular, spent a lot of time trying to figure this out when she first started doing this. And it is just spaghetti on a wall most of the time. Especially because, like, if you're across platforms, like the stuff that does well on TikTok is not the same stuff that does well on Instagram. And it's just like people are looking for something different. And on TikTok, it's quick scrolling, and you just have to hook them in the first couple of seconds. And with Instagram, people are more likely to kind of sit and watch this play out, because they're, a lot of time they're following a particular person and they're there to see their content. And so it was a lot of like, what types of videos are doing good, even stuff that's trending, like wasn't always doing the best, and posts that were just like, I'm going to throw this out there would do really well. And it's very hard to navigate, and it fluctuates so much that I don't even know if good advice is to, spend a lot of time figuring out what's working, because it's so revolving.
Yeah, I think it changes a lot.
Yeah, it definitely does. And like some people like the stuff that's really new and like, but for me, because I'm 100, like I don't know about pop culture things at all. And the stuff that hits Instagram was on TikTok like a month ago. Like I'll send Sierra things and she's like, that's funny. That soundbite is so old.
I live in your world, Lauren. I'm the month behind Instagrammer.
Yes, but I like that kind of stuff, or like the stuff that's kind of like a throwback or a little bit more retro, or like, old sound bites from shows that maybe aren't on anymore, or things like, oh, this is like an old New Girl one, how cute, or just like whatever. So I think like, yeah, like the Kardashian ones go right over my head, or like things from like new shows. I'm like, I don't know who that is. I don't know what they're talking about. So it's just like the audience is so wide that, but I do think the thing that works is consistency. And so like I had talked to, I thought I was talking to HK Green about this, who has a Cowboy Romance coming out in the fall. And she has like this really awesome, like very intense, super type A, like spreadsheet of all of her posts for the year.
Wow.
And she did admit that like, she has to go in and change them frequently because trends change so much. But like just making an effort to be like, I'm going to post this thing. If this doesn't work, I'll try to fill something else in. Like, people want an active presence. It helps build, people want to follow you because they see your posts. And so I think being consistent is something that really works for people, whatever that consistency looks like for you, even if you're just, throwing together reels and figuring it out. Like, people, this is sort of why we created the podcast. Like, we want people to get to know authors and author community for sure, but also just that readers can hear about the stories and characters and how they got made and get to know people. Because that's how it feels when you're following them on Instagram, is you're not just buying into that one book they wrote that you love. Like, you're buying into who they are, And so being consistent with those readers, I think, is great. And I don't know about everybody else, but the BTS stuff, like getting behind the scenes things about characters and books, I eat that up like catnip. And so, like, following an author who will give you, things like that, I think that that's really fun for people who like your stories. So keep throwing the spaghetti. It will work itself out.
The right things will stick. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm so excited that you're working on something new and that, the juices are still flowing and the stories are still there and that everything has been going so well with the release. And I did have a question about your book launch event on Friday. How did you set that up? That's so cool.
Yeah. So my Bible study that I mentioned that I texted to let them know I was writing a book has been above and beyond supportive. And so they all were like, we want to throw, a launch party event of some sort, like something. So they brought it up and we just kind of brainstormed ideas and whatnot. And there's a local bookstore in town that I am friends with the owner. I got to know her and she's been amazing. Like, her store donated books to my kids' school for Read Across America week. Like, she's just awesome. And so we reached out to her to see if we could host it at their bookstore because they do offer events somewhat regularly there. And they have the date open. And so we just planned it and we're going to do it. And I'm super excited. I'm excited to see, some local friends like get to come and, get copies of the book. And I'm going to make a couple of sweet treats that are like talked about in the book. So we're going to have some Love Another Gold inspired snacks. And yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited. It's just going to be a fun like celebration of getting it out there and, seeing people that have supported me along the way and meeting some new people that hopefully I'll get to know from here. So yeah, so that is totally my friends planned that. And I'm super grateful and super excited for it.
Are you like talking about the book at all? Are you reading a piece of it? Are you doing a signing?
Yeah. So the ticket to the event comes with a signed copy. So I'll be signing there. And we just nailed down, I think we're going to do like a short, like 25-minute kind of Q&A, like guided Q&A, like they'll have some questions prepared. And so there'll be a little bit of structure, but then it'll be kind of come and go. Like, people can come in and chit chat and have snacks and get their book signed and leave when they need to. But so it should be fun. I don't really know what to expect because everything's brand new to me. So I'm always like, I don't know what I'm doing, but we're just going to try it out and have fun.
Well, hopefully this is like a good warm up for Friday when you get sort of really random questions.
That's right.
Maybe there'll be some overlap.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have a special pen you're going to sign with?
I will probably just use a Sharpie. I thought about using a purple Sharpie, but I'd seen a long time ago the former K-State football coach said one time that he doesn't sign with a purple Sharpie because the ink slowly discolors over time and turns more like pink. So I was like, okay, I'll probably just stick with classic black Sharpies so that it stays the color it's supposed to be.
Yeah, that's funny. That's so cute though. You should keep it. Like, you should sign it and then like keep the Sharpie. It'll be special.
I should. That's a good idea.
I'm a Cancer, so I'm super nostalgic about stuff like that.
Oh, I love nostalgic things. That's why I wrote a college romance. So I love nostalgia.
Yeah, you can frame that journal that you started writing in and then put the Sharpie with it and hang it up.
Yeah.
Like the businesses put their first dollar earned or whatever.
That's right.
That's your ID journal.
I recently went back to the coffee shop that I was sitting at. And I took the journal with me and I took a copy of the book and like took a picture because I was like, this is where it starts. But
that's so cute.
I flipped back through the journal and it was really fun to look at like what stayed and what evolve in the story. Like what elements that I had originally thought about actually wound up being in the story, and then other things that, changed along the way. So that was like a fun activity to just look back through.
Yeah, that's great about having like a written copy, because I feel like on your computer you'd be like, oh, that idea is dumb. I'm going to delete that or erase it, whatever. Yeah, you're like, oh, I can't even believe I even wrote that down. Or just like, that's taking up space. I know I'm going to cut that. But to have it written, I think that's really cool that you can do things like that, like look back on it. So when you're at that coffee shop, are you getting something super sugary and sweet like Lana would?
I did. Okay, so in the book on Lana and Mateo's first coffee date, she orders an iced horchata latte. And that is the drink that I had at that coffee shop that day. And so that's what she orders in the book. So, of course, I ordered the same drink again this time. So it was like a small little nod to the book's origin story, sitting in that coffee shop.
That's so sweet. That is really, really cute. Well, awesome. I'm so excited for you. I could tell how excited you were when we met back in January. And so I'm so happy for you that the day is finally here and the cat's out of the bag so you can celebrate with all of your family and loved ones. I appreciate you, being so candid with me and sharing about your journey. And listeners, if you haven't already, you can go grab a copy of Love and Other Goals, because by the time this reaches your ears, it will already be out.
That's right.
And for updates, Tracy, where can people see things that you're working on or behind the scenes things on your characters?
Definitely just follow me on Instagram. So my handle is at author Tracy Baack. So I'm sure that'll be in your post notes or whatnot. But yeah, that's pretty much the only place that I post things. I do have a website, tracybaack.com, and you can sign up for a newsletter and get some fun bonus content. So on release day, I'm actually sending out a bonus chapter that's written from Mateo's point of view, since we didn't get his point of view in the book. So that will be coming. And
that is so exciting.
I know. And I have some fun other bonus content planned for July. And I'll eventually, it's going out on release day, but obviously people listening to this, it's past release day, so you can't sign up for the newsletter in time for release day. So I'll include it in future news. Probably my auto response will eventually include a link to this chapter, but I'm super excited. It's like my little way of keeping them alive, because I just get really sad sometimes that they're not real people.
Yeah. Wait, can you tell me? Can you tell me what scene it is?
Yes, it's there when they meet at the lake games, when Aaron has just and he hasn't rejected her. I can't say it like that. When Aaron has not taken his opportunity with her and Mateo swoops in, it is that scene that we get from Mateo.
I love that scene in the kayak. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting.
Yes, it's coming. Tomorrow. Oh my gosh, it's tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow. One more sleep and then you wake up and it's here.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tracy. It was so nice chatting with you. Congratulations again. Have fun tomorrow, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Lauren.